how would you take over a country? You take away their ability to, grow crops.
Food.
Food supply is critical. And we know the growth is coming, but we can't lose the ability to grow the crop.
Well, this is the Think Brazos Podcast, and we're joined today by Trey Wharton. He is running for State District 12 of the State House of Representatives. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
So in just a couple of minutes, I usually say 2 minutes or less, could you give us a brief overview of who you are, why you're running, and maybe if you have a few important platform stances to go into?
Sure, yeah. I grew up in Huntsville, Texas, and then I went away to TCU to school and moved back home with my wife and started an insurance agency from the ground up. And so the whole time I was building an agency and raising our family, I was also giving back to the community in a variety of fashions, whether it be nonprofit boards or whatnot. But most recently, I was on the Chamber of Commerce board for 7 years. I was the chairman of the board for 1 year. I was selected to the school board 3 times, and I was, in the 8 years I was on it, 3 years of it, I was the president. And then I've been on the hospital community board there also. So I've been giving back to the community the whole time while I was raising a family and growing a business because I felt like that was my duty because I could. And I'm just, I had a lot of people calling me last summer, asking me to consider this, and started to think about it and felt like I was supposed to try to serve on a bigger scale. I filed to run against an incumbent that I didn't feel represented our conservative values, and so that's what I was doing. But I'm still doing that. We need a voice, and I wanted to be that voice, and I've been serving for the last 30 years. So.
Okay, and the 12th state, I think I'm saying this right, the 12th district of the State House of Representatives for Texas is one of the larger districts, covers, a bunch of counties, covers a little bit of Bryan, covers obviously Huntsville. The question, especially for folks out here in Bryan College Station, is how do you plan, if you win, how do you plan to approach representing this wide group of folks, obviously not just the Huntsville area? Have you given any thought to that?
Yeah, it's kind of the same philosophy I've done the whole time. When I was on the school board of the chamber, I was extremely engaged with either the members of the chamber or the families and the staff of the schools to make sure that they were represented and their voice was heard. I called a lot of people all the time going, hey, I need some feedback for me to know that I'm making the right educated decision that's right for the community. And I would take that same philosophy throughout the district. I've put a lot of miles on my truck in the last 2.5 months, and meeting the people so that the only way to actually represent somebody is for them to know you and you to know them. And that's what I would do. I promised that I would be seen and they would know me, and I want to know them, because how else are you going to be represented correctly?
So what would you say are a couple of themes of your campaign, or things you want to get across to people about what you believe, your stances?
I said, well, I was raised conservative Christian home. Still have that. My wife and I both, she grew up in a rural community. I grew up in Huntsville, so they're very similar. We moved back there with the idea that's where we wanted to raise our family, was in the same type of atmosphere. And so that's kind of, I want to carry that forward and make sure we keep those views, because I believe that the district, all these counties have thrived with that ideology, and we want to make sure we keep it in place.
I guess looking a little more into some of the details of what you're going to be facing when, if you are elected for this position, Texas is growing super fast. Everybody knows that. I think we're close to 1,000 people a day for the last few years coming into Texas. There's a lot of good with that for industry, commerce, all of that. But there's also impacts on housing affordability, housing market in general. There's impacts on the grid. There's impacts on a variety of things with Texas. Where do you think you stand in terms of the Texans that are already here? Is there a role the state can play in mitigating any impacts of this just massive growth, which largely is good for Texas? But is there any, again, sometimes I don't phrase my questions the best, but looking at the state versus local versus, where do you stand on regulation with the state to try and deal with some of these impacts on Texans?
Right. No, and I see what you're saying, because that is a big issue, that especially this district, because you're going to have the growth coming straight up I-45, Highway
Correct.
6, 290. Well, that
Correct.
hits all parts of this district.
That's right.
And the most heavily populated parts of the district. And so the state and the county and the local officials are going to have to work together, because we know the growth is coming. Mm-hmm. We don't want to look like Houston.
Right.
And so we need to make sure we manage it in a form that's okay. That's okay. We don't mind that. Mm-hmm. We just don't want to be overrun. I think we all enjoy our semi-rural atmospheres. We prefer that, but we don't want to be overrun by the just this extreme explosion of population and stuff just popping up all over the place. So I think it's going to be critical that the state and the county and the cities work together. And then in the even more rural parts, they have a water issue, and that growth is going to cause a problem, not just with water, but also the infrastructure is so old in so many parts of it. And so it's kind of build upon itself. So that's kind of, we're going to have to make sure we're working together on all that.
Okay. Do you have any, ideas as things that the state could do? You mentioned infrastructure, you mentioned water, to help some of these, because you got some very rural communities in this district that, like you said, are going to be facing some infrastructure issues in the future. Is there a role of the state in helping with some of these local communities?
I think they're going to need more help than just like the incorporated cities, because they're going to need the funds to help pay for those things, whether it be through grants or whatnot. And I think having somebody that can help them, lead them in the right path to get those things done is critical.
Okay.
So,
and then another facet of this area we've been talking about here with the growth is farmland in, again, the more rural parts of this district. I forget the overall Texas statistic, but it's like a bunch of acres every year are going from farmland to, housing developments or what have you. Where do you stand on that balance between, having the, farmland to be able to sustain your community in terms of food and all that versus growth, which is good? It's a very vague question. But.
It's a very vague question. I think the most critical thing, and that was something that Senator Kacal addressed, and that was we don't need foreign countries coming in and buying our farmland. I mean, how would you take over a country? You take away their ability to, grow crops.
Food.
Food supply is critical, and we know the growth is coming, but we can't lose the ability to grow the crops and have that stuff. So that is a vague question, and there's going to be a somewhat vague answer, because that's going to take a lot of study and a lot of people working together to make sure it's managed properly.
Yeah. Okay. And I have heard some folks in the primary talking about the foreign companies issue going on. Is that happening in this district? Have you seen any instances of that?
I don't personally know of an instance. Okay. I know I've been talking to people. And those are things that they're concerned about and should be.
Okay.
So
got it. All right. So something kind of close to what we've been talking about, but another thing that impacts the price of a new home, especially, is regulation. There was a study, I think, that the National Home Builders put out that said that close to 25% of a new house's sticker price is from regulation. That's at the local level, that's at state level, some of it, and that's at the federal level. Where do you, obviously you're not going to like that fact, but do you think there's a role for the state to play in kind of cutting some of that red tape in an effort to make the homes as affordable as possible for
I
new
think
families?
there is, because that kind of goes back to the local governments and entities that could help make sure that the homes are being built safely and correctly and done affordably. And by being able to kind of pull the state out of it somewhat, you shouldn't have to pay those many surcharges, taxes, whatever you want to call them. But I think the local governments understand that what is actually needed, and that would kind of bring it back to the people directly.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. Well, there are a lot of communities in Texas where that's not happening at the local level. And I don't know if there's any, in this district, but that is a hot topic at the legislature the last few sessions, is things like regulation and whether or not the state has a role in preempting where local communities are not trying to make as affordable home building as possible. And so you're more of a let the local folks figure it out. That's not really the state's role. Is that kind of what?
I'm
where
for
you're
less bureaucracy.
Okay.
So it's kind of
everywhere. Yeah.
pretty much, yeah.
Okay. You got any ideas on things, if you win, areas within the state government bureaucracy where you'd like to see them go away?
I don't know if there's things that you could specifically say go away, but it kind of goes back to the same ideologies. Like let's push it to the local entities for them to have more say in what's going on, because I think we all have our different facets and the diversity of the different counties, even across the entire state. So we all have different challenges, and so one specific law may not be really applicable and may actually hurt another one. So if you have more local involvement saying this is what we need, then I believe that's better than the state just coming down and saying this is what has to be done.
Okay. And at another district that represents Bryan College Station, the 14th, there's a candidate I just heard today or yesterday where there's a spot on the news. He mentioned about term limits was a big thing for him, as far as making sure that we don't get people coming in who are, are there for life, basically. Do you have any opinion on the term limits issue?
On the state level, national level? Well, it kind of goes back to what I said all along, because you kind of think about what a state legislator gets paid, it's $600 a month.
Right.
Well, I don't have a problem with that, because that kind of goes back to the forefathers of the country that said this was not supposed to be a lifestyle. Okay. This is supposed to be you're giving back and serving. And so I think that's a good thing. It doesn't need to be a lifestyle, because that's when the problems really start occurring.
Okay. So you're saying that the very fact that at the state level legislators are paid so low that might actually help with this issue of entrenched.
Well, I think it keeps some people from getting into it for the wrong reasons.
Okay.
Because then they go, oh, I can draw a paycheck from here on out, and that's not it. I mean, that's you're supposed to represent your district or your counties or whatever you're elected to, and how else are you going to be there and be involved with them to be their voice if you have a lifestyle and you're living somewhere else 90% of the time?
Okay. Yeah, I can see both sides. I've heard the other side too that makes a lot of sense to me, that if they were to make a, quote, living wage for elected representatives, that would allow those who aren't well off enough to be able to take that pay cut. So I can see both sides. But that is some of the main questions that I had. Have we missed anything that you want to go into today regarding your candidacy? Or
Well, I mean, I just, for me personally, I'm just trying to serve on a bigger capacity because of my history of doing all I've done. And I have instances of things where I was the chairman of the board for the Chamber of Commerce, and we had the university wanting to put in a conference center, and they wanted me to sign off that the chamber was okay with that. And I said, well, I'm not going to say that without talking to all of my members that this would directly affect. So I started calling different hotel owners and said, hey, I need to know if you're okay with this. You've been a taxpayer, a member, been involved in the community for a long time. You need to have a say on this. And they came back to me, and I was kind of surprised. This is why I do this with everything I do. They came back to me with a completely different answer. They said, no, please bring the conference center because we will get the overflow and our business will flourish. Oh. And I didn't see that side of it, but that's why whenever I'm working on things, I'm calling people that it directly affects to get their information and to be more educated so that I know that I'm doing the right thing. So they were okay with that, and that's just kind of one of my, for instances of how I operate. So
okay, very cool. Well, how can the people of this district get in touch with you if they want to get in touch with your campaign, if they want to learn more or help you?
No, it's fine. They can go to the website. It's Wharton for Texas, and then my email is it's a little confusing. It's Wharton, the number 4, Texas @gmail.com.
Perfect. And we'll put it up on the screen for people viewing it.
Okay,
that kind of
appreciate
thing.
it.
But yeah, it's been fun to talk to you today. Again, this is Trey Wharton running for the 12th State District for the state of Texas. And thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
No, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.